Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're traveling to the Horn of Africa, Djibouti specifically, and
Oh, Djibouti. Always a lot going on there.
right. It's one of those places that doesn't always make headlines, but when it
It's
does,
usually something big.
exactly. And this time it's a real head scratcher. Their president, he's hospitalized over in France. Now that in itself isn't unheard of. Leaders get sick,
Happens all the time.
right. But it's the silence surrounding it. That's what's got everyone talking.
A wall of silence can be deafening. What's the source on this?
So we're diving into an episode of Voix de Sans Voix de Djibouti, which, if my French is correct,
Voice of the voiceless.
you got it,
Quote,
seems to be a platform for, well, the concerns of everyday Djiboutians, and they are not holding back about their very quiet president.
interesting. So it's not just official channels keeping things under wraps. What are folks saying?
Well, the whispers, and I mean, whispers suggest it's the president's own family trying to control the narrative, and not just, your average family hush-hush. We're talking about his clan.
Ah, now it gets interesting. Djibouti's clan system.
Yeah.
That's deeply ingrained in their power structures.
Like woven right in. So this illness, it's throwing a wrench into everything. Imagine if you live there, right? Your leader's sick, nobody's saying anything.
You'd be on edge, wondering who's really in control, what happens next.
Exactly. And the podcast hosts, they actually call it a bomb, a retardment, a ticking time bomb.
Strong words. Makes you think this is about more than just one man's health.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting. The source claims the family's fear, like their driving motivation for all this secrecy, is utter chaos. Political chaos, social unrest, you name it.
They're afraid the system can't handle a transition of power.
Exactly. Like they don't even trust their own systems, which begs the question, is there even a succession plan?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Without a clear next in line, things could get messy fast.
And not just a little messy either. This ticking time bomb phrase, it really stuck with me. Are we to believe nobody saw this coming? Or are they just really good at pretending everything's fine?
Because one way or another, if there's no plan, this is going to have a ripple effect.
Huge ripple effect. The source says neither the president's party nor any opposition groups seem to have a plan B. So serious illness equals power vacuum, and that's never good.
Especially given Djibouti's unique position.
Right. It's like this tiny country with a huge EE global footprint, refueling stop for the U.S. Navy, China's only overseas military base is there.
Strategic location at the mouth of the Red Sea. Controls a vital shipping route.
So, yeah, this internal power struggle, suddenly the whole world's watching. But before we get into those global implications, what about the people of Djibouti? I mean, they're the ones living this.
Right, can't forget about them.
The source says this news blackout, it's causing real fear, real anxiety. Imagine not knowing what's happening with your leader being kept in the dark like that.
Breeds mistrust, suspicion.
And when people feel unheard, ignored by their own government, that's when things can escalate quickly. Protests, unrest, even violence.
Definitely a recipe for instability, and not just within Djibouti's borders either.
And this is where our deep dive takes another turn. Get this. The podcast introduces a whistleblower, someone claiming to be working inside either a European or American embassy in Djibouti.
Ooh, a whistleblower. Now we're getting into spy thriller territory.
Right. And this person claims that within the ruling family, within that powerful subclan, things are heating up fast.
They're saying the power struggle is getting ugly.
Exactly. Now, I know what you're thinking. A whistleblower. Gotta be skeptical. And you're right, we always have to be cautious with these kinds of claims. But the level of detail this alleged insider provides,
It does make you wonder, could there be more to this story than meets the eye?
that's the question, isn't it? And it's a question we're going to unpack right after this quick break. This whole thing feels like, I don't know, a house of cards. One good gust of wind and the whole thing could topple.
And it's the people living in that house we have to think about.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in the politics, the power plays, but there are very real economic stakes here. And not just for Djibouti.
Right, this isn't some isolated incident. A destabilized Djibouti sends ripples, shockwaves, really, through the whole region.
So let's talk economics. You're an investor, right? You hear political instability, potential power vacuum. Are you lining up to put money in Djibouti?
Probably not. Uncertainty is the enemy of investment, both foreign and domestic.
And that's what the source is highlighting. Foreign investment, which so many developing economies rely on, it could dry up overnight.
And it's not just the big players, the international firms. Think about local entrepreneurs, people trying to build businesses, lives for themselves. They get caught in the crossfire, too.
Absolutely. It's like this fear, this uncertainty, it trickles down and impacts everything.
And we haven't even touched on what happens to essential services when a government is more concerned with holding on to power than serving its people.
Oh man, healthcare, education, infrastructure, those all become bargaining chips in a power struggle.
And who suffers the most? The
Mhm.
everyday people, the ones who are already the most vulnerable.
It's a vicious cycle. But going back to Djibouti's location for a second, because that adds a whole other layer to this,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. We've talked about the U.S. and Chinese presence, but it goes beyond that.
Right. One of the most important shipping lanes in the world runs right past Djibouti.
So internal instability, that has the potential to disrupt global trade, supply chains.
Suddenly, this small nation with a big problem becomes everyone's problem.
And that's often when we see outside actors with their own agendas decide to get involved.
And knowing Djibouti's history, foreign intervention rarely ends well for the people caught in the middle.
Which is why this situation is so precarious. It's like walking a tightrope, and no one knows who's holding the balancing pole.
And that sense of uncertainty of not knowing what comes next, that's what makes this whole situation so concerning. It's a lot to process, isn't it? I mean, we've got potential political upheaval, economic uncertainty, possible international involvement.
And at the heart of it all, a nation and its people facing an incredibly uncertain future.
It really drives home that old saying, information is power. Or in this case, a lack of information. This whole news blackout, it's like a breeding ground for suspicion and distrust.
Absolutely. The source argues that this lack of transparency is not just undemocratic, it's downright harmful to Djibouti's future.
Yeah.
Makes finding a peaceful way forward that much harder.
Which, at the end of the day, that's what we all want, right? A peaceful resolution. The people of Djibouti deserve that much. They're the ones living with this uncertainty every single day.
It's easy to get caught up in the geopolitical chess game, but we can't forget about the human cost here. These are real lives, real families impacted by the decisions being made or not made in those halls of power.
It's a heavy thought, and I appreciate this source, this podcast, for bringing it to light. Because even if we feel powerless to change things from afar, even just knowing, even just talking about it, that's a start, right?
It is. Awareness is the first step. And who knows, maybe these whispers from Djibouti, maybe they'll reach the ears of someone who can make a difference.
I hope so. Well, on that note, folks, that's going to do it for this deep dive. A huge thank you to our expert for helping us unpack this incredibly complex situation. And to you, our listeners, thanks for joining us. Remember, the world is full of these stories, these whispers waiting to be heard. It's up to all of us to listen. Until next time, stay curious.